There have been different theories how we are able to perceive this regular beat in music, but one of them is the theory of entrainment. So entrainment is a term that stems from physics initially. So if you put two pendulum clocks on a common support, so say I put two pendulum clocks on my bookshelf behind me, and they initially have two different phases and periods. Because they're placed on a common support on the bookshelf, and as long as the bookshelf has some kind of give in it, over time, these pendulum clocks will start to synchronize. And so this process of these two pendulum clocks synchronizing is basically what entrainment is. Think of yourself having an internal oscillating periodicity, and the music has its oscillating periodicity, and our internal attention becomes driven and synchronized and entrained to the attention in the music. And so we perceive beat perception through this process of coupling between the stimulus, the musical stimulus, and our kind of attention, which also has this oscillating development.
It is not the most developed musical language that we have, the rhythm itself. And therefore, over the culture, it gets more and more exposed. And one very good example is from Stravinsky, The Rite of Spring, which is interestingly, it's written for orchestra and it's very rhythm focused music. And it's mostly strings, brass woodwinds, and percussion playing very fundamental rhythmical gestures and beats, and it feels sometimes very rude in a way and very raw. And it is a completely different thing that when this music got premiered in Paris back the time, and people really were upset because they thought it's no more culture. This is way too rude and way too direct and too fundamental. And nowadays it's one of the most beloved musics of modern music, classical music.
Even with basic rhythm, or the basic rhythm, can be so immensely powerful because it's the basis for whatever you're creating there. There's this basic rhythm. You add a sound there, you add a noise there, or anything like that. But the basic rhythm, this is the hypnotic thing. This is what always comes back, what gets you in the loop, what gets you into the trance. A lot of DJs, they start with a banger, people go on. What I do, I play a completely basic beat for exactly what I always say. I have to sort out the bases here. I want to start from the beginning, and I'm sorting out the bases. And how do I do this? With simplicity. Monotony, hypnotic simplicity.
O ritmo pode ser encantatório, não é? O próprio movimento em si pode facilitar que a pessoa comece a ter algumas experiências resultantes do próprio movimento, como sejam, por exemplo, desequilíbrio, vertigens, ou outro tipo de sensações menores, mas que ela enquadre dentro de uma experiência de transe, uma experiência transcendente, não é? Religiosa, não é? E, portanto, aliás, tanto no Brasil como em África, etc., muitas das sessões que são feitas em que as pessoas entram em transe começam com danças, não é? com movimentos. Só depois de uma série, às vezes 1 hora ou 2, ou não sei, não é? É que acaba porque a pessoa, entretanto, começa completamente a dissociar.
By moving to a syncopated beat, your body is enacting or extending into the music. What these spaces or these open gaps do is that they invite the body to fill them in with body movement. So syncopations kind of create opportunities, or they invite the body to physically move and thus actually take part in the musical structure itself.
I think that's one of the things that makes clubbing hugely popular in a way that some religions aren't, is because you don't have to leave your body behind. They're physically engaged. You take your body with you and you dance to the music, and you don't feel embarrassed about your physical, emotional response to what's happening. It's part of it. It's supposed to be part of it. You're supposed to be filled with endorphins and have a rush of dopamine and, you know, feel amazing and be uplifted and feel happy. I mean, you do get those experiences in religions, but they're often quite controlled.
Und Allah sagt, ich passe nirgendwo in meine Schöpfung hinein, nur in das Herz meines aufrichtigen Suchenden, meines aufrichtigen Dieners. So begibt sich der Sufi erstmal körperlich in Bewegung in Richtung Herz. Alle Organe, alle Sinne konzentrieren sich auf das Herz und er dreht sich. Er dreht sich um die Herzachse und konzentriert sich nur auf den Herzschlag. Und nach den ersten Momenten, je nachdem, wie geübt ein drehender Sufi ist, geht erstmal das Visuelle verloren. Trotz offener Augen sieht er nichts mehr. Ja, es verwischt und dann wird sogar alles schwarz. Und dann verliert er das Gespür, das Raumgefühl. Alle Sinne gehen verloren, bis auf das Hören. Bis auf das Hören des Herzschlags.
Also es gibt den Jumbri-Spieler, den Chef, den Meister, der spielt und singt, und neben ihm gibt es 2 oder 3 Leute, die das spielen. Und die nennt man die Koyos. Die stehen auf, die sitzen und irgendwann, natürlich nach dem Erlaubnis von dem Meister, stehen sie auf und machen sie Choreografie und während sie weiterspielen, ja. Und das fördert einfach diese Atmosphäre vom Tanzen. Wobei Tanzen ist in genauer nicht immer gleich Freude bedeutet. Es kann auch Leiden. Es ist meistens Leiden. Das Ritual hat sich geändert mit der Zeit. Also früher es gibt Berichte, die sagen, dass das Ritual sogar 1 Monat lang gedauert hat. Ja, man kam von überall und traf sich in einem Punkt, in sogenannten Musem, wo alle Gnauer Meister sich getroffen haben, und die haben 30 Nächte lang Musik gemacht und gefeiert und auch in Trance gegangen. Aber mit der Zeit, was es jetzt gibt, ist Lila, die sogenannte Lila. Lila ist Nacht auf Arabisch. Und da beginnt man zum Beispiel um 7 Uhr, also um 19 Uhr bis 7 Uhr morgens.
Alles, was zu viel ist, ist zu viel des Guten. Und so wie der Mensch einen Körper hat, müssen wir auch der Meditation oder der Wiederholung und den Ritualen einen Anfang und ein Ende geben. Denn ansonsten verliert sich der Mensch. Und für den Sufi gilt es nicht, sich zu verlieren, sondern sich zu finden. Und so wie in der Schule jede Unterrichtseinheit 45 Minuten ist, der Stoff Mathematik kann man ein ganzes Leben lang studieren. Aber für die Schüler wird es immer nur 45 Minuten ein Stück unterrichtet. Und genauso ist es auch mit den Meditationen und den Ritualen. Innerhalb der Tradition gibt es bestimmte Anzahl. In unserer täglichen Praxis habe ich eben erwähnt, zum Beispiel 1500 Mal Allah mit Zunge, 1500 Mal mit Herz. Dann gibt es noch 300 Lobpreisungen und dann 100 Mal noch Vedut, der Liebende und so weiter. Ganz unterschiedliche Formeln und Lobpreisungen, die wir mit bestimmter Anzahl rezitieren. Damit wir uns nicht verlieren, sondern damit wir immer auch geerdet bleiben.
The evidence we have for music starts about 43,000 years ago, in caves mostly, where we found, well, archaeologists have found ancient musical instruments like bones made into flute-like, or actually more like an Egyptian ney-like instrument, a bone pipe, a wing bone of a vulture, actually hollowed out or with the ends cut off and played as a simple instrument with finger holes. And those instruments sound really great if you just play them in a normal environment. But when you go back to the caves where they were found, if you take the Isteritz pipe and take it to the Isteritz cave in France, where it was made, the acoustics of that particular cave are fantastic. They're huge. There's echo, there's reverberation. And it changes the sound of the instrument, of that simple musical instrument, dramatically. And it kind of brings it to life. It adds to the sound that you're making as a human being. It adds a sense of space and place. It contextualizes the instrument, and it adds the voice of the cave. If you go back to a time when people were completely surrounded by spirits, by beings from other realms, then that sound in that cave, deep in the darkness, must have seemed very powerful, and must have seemed, and I think even seems today, like a conversation between the person playing the instrument and the cave itself. And there's lots of evidence that these caves were very, very meaningful places, that the sound coming back to the musician was the sound of the cave, and that the cave was the interface between the other world, the underworld, the other realms, the higher realms, the lower realms, and the day-to-day world that people lived in. Because people didn't venture into these caves, the deep bits, very often. They lived at the entrances. So I think even in the earliest part of human history, echo and reverberation were very special things. They were markers of unusual spaces. You have to remember there were no echo units, there were no tape delays, there were no bathrooms that sounded a bit reverberant. There were no halls or concert halls or churches or temples that had big echo. There weren't any outside buildings. So the only places with echo and reverberation were the odd mountainside, where maybe the voices of the spirits of the gods of divine creatures came back to you, and you believed that some strange creature lived up there. And in the caves, the same thing, that when you went down there, the whole space would have been alive. And today, I think we add those sounds because it gives an electronic instrument that is made in a studio or by an electronic sound source that has no context on its own. It gives it a spirit. It's like adding the gods to that synthesizer. It's like bringing it to life, making it speak, giving it a voice, giving it humanity, giving it a sense, bringing it into the world, into the outside world. So there's a deep level of cultural connection that echo and space have with us.
Beginning of the 20th century, composers really used the orchestral instruments quite extensively and more like sound design instruments. So they used the orchestra like an electronic musician uses the Moog Model D or a synthesizer, and to recreate something that they heard in nature. There's also very nice Afternoon of a Faun. It's a composition by Debussy, also very popular. And you hear this animal played by a bassoon, and you think, yeah, this is how I imagine it could sound like.
In genauer Musik verwendet man viel die Symbolik. Also man sagt, dass Gimbri, dieses Instrument, weil es bassisch und mächtig ist, der Mann ist. Und diese Krakels, das sind die Frauen. Und weißt du, ohne die Frauen wäre der Mann nix. Weißt du? Aber die Frauen können allein.
Music is not as precise as a painting is. We just see with your eyes, okay, this is an elephant, and this is the beach that I see here. But at the end, each of those instruments with an orchestra has their own unique character. A bassoon sounds like a bassoon, and it has this kind of quirky feel. So maybe you can also use a bassoon to create a frog or something. But each of those instruments, that's what I'm trying to say, is has their own character and their own color. And with combining them, you can create new shades, and you can go in a certain direction.
There's many studies that say that drumming was the first way of doing it. Of course, with the evolution of music and other type of instruments, we started going to different frequencies, as drumming they come from the lowest frequencies. That's why you feel it on the body. And then as the time evolved, you can have like violins or more higher pitch instruments. So you can go up in your body, mainly for the mind. If you have like higher pitch frequencies, you feel it on the mind, is to activate more the brain. If you have lower frequencies, is more the drums, is more for the body, for the lower body.
Wenn wir Rhythmen hören, so wie die Trommel, die der Sufi spielt, dann fühlen wir uns noch lebendiger. Denn der Beat gibt uns das Gefühl zu leben, so wie der Herzschlag. Solange das Herz schlägt und pumpt, sind wir am Leben, sind wir lebendig und fühlen auch eine Lebenskraft. Und das ist es. Das Leben ist der Atem, ist ein Hauch, es ist ein Geben und ein Nehmen durch Akustik, eine Reflexion dessen, was man empfängt und dann sendet. Und der Schlag, der Beat, der Rhythmus, das ist die Bewegung. Das ist Zeugnis davon, dass dieser Hauch, dieser Sound auch lebendig ist. Wenn er trommelt, Allah, 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 das ist der Herzschlag. Ja? Und wenn er sich dann bewegt, dann fühlt er, wie er dahin zurückgeht, wo er entstanden ist.
Dancing is a multimodal, sensory modal experience, right? It's auditory, but it's also motor and kind of interoceptive and also proprioceptive, right? Because we move in space. There's also research showing that, like, you know, dancing very vigorously, which is a kind of exercise, also can release like increased levels of serotonin and opioids in the brain, which is a kind of a more direct way of thinking of a sensory kind of pleasure, I guess.
There's evidence going back an awful long way of people taking different types of substances deliberately to change their state of mind.
Of course, sometimes they use substances like properties. In the jungle, they use ayahuasca, and in Siberia, they use other type of power plants and medicine plants.
There are many substances that people have taken, and these have been found. There have been residues of magic mushrooms in pots found by archaeologists. There are certainly lots of examples of rock art where people have carved pictures of people who seem to be having a drug experience.
Man, genau, also zumindest was die Musiker betrifft, ja, das habe ich selber erfahren. Ich war in dem Tempel in Essaouira von genauer Musik. Das ist der heiligste Ort. Die Musiker und der Meister, die fangen an, Haschisch zu rauchen. und dann essen sie vor dem Spielen, dann spielen sie, fangen sie an und der Ritual fängt ein bisschen leicht und fröhlich an am Anfang. Dann machen sie eine Pause und rauchen nochmal. Dann ist es vorbei mit Rauchen. Dann rauchen sie so 5 Stunden nicht mehr. Sie rauchen intensiv am Anfang und fertig.
We have evidence of that from a long time ago. And when you look around the world, it's a fairly normal process for people to use all sorts of different substances to enhance the experience of a ritual. I mean, in the Christian church, they use these smoke censers that they swing, and that smoke has psychedelic effects. Frankincense can have psychedelic effects. Ritual cultures for thousands of years have taken advantage of anything that will help them to have powerful experiences to enhance those experiences. And that includes music, sound, food stuff, well, nowadays chemicals. So I don't think it's a surprise that nowadays those things do appear also in club culture.